When it comes to systems, you want something that will start showing results fast. You're looking for a tool that can enable your 3PL or warehouse to get to the next level. So why wait? That's why Cart and Cloud provides supported, fast onboarding that can have your WMS up and running in hours, not months. Jump into Cart and Cloud's easy-to-use workflows for all of your services, including cross-docking, serialized inventory tracking, e-commerce order fulfillment, and more. This software is built by logistics people for logistics people, and those logistics people are standing by to help train you and support you so that you can be successful with your customer. With 24/7 real-time reporting and free online training, you need to check out Cart and Cloud for your operation. Take the next step in your operation by heading to cartandcloud.com/free-demo or click the link in the show notes.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I'm going to be joined by Bob LeGere, who is head of sales at Coldcart. And Coldcart is focusing on the cold chain side of fulfillment. And we're going to dive more into what Coldcart's all about, how they're approaching the space a little differently. And we're going to talk a little bit, too, about the differences between fulfilling from the cold chain perspective versus dry goods and some of the complications maybe that are there and some of the considerations that companies should be taking when looking at those options. So, Bob, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Kevin. Thanks for having me. I'm good.
Definitely. Happy to get you on here. Happy to talk about this. I think it's very interesting what you guys are doing. And I think the space is very interesting too. And one that I think has a lot of questions and hopefully you can answer those today. So for people that maybe have not heard of Coldcart yet or are not familiar, why don't you give us kind of a brief overview of what you guys do?
Yeah. So at our core, we're a tech company. We've built this nifty proprietary dashboard product interface, whatever you want to call it. And really what it helps do is make you better at fulfilling your products, whether it's you yourself or, a third party. We also optimize for last mile carriers. There's a lot of opportunity to customize as well as keep that customization automated. And, as we were talking about before we started here, our kind of internal joke, because I wouldn't say we fall into a lot of the categories or acronyms that are used in the space, we call our system FML because it's built for fulfillment management and logistics. And anyone that ships perishable today knows that FML is also the perfect acronym for your day-to-day life. It is certainly very complicated and challenging. Yeah. And as someone who comes from the non-perishable world, I've definitely seen the differences and nuances to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a great acronym to have there. I think just in the logistics world and in general, I would probably say that on a daily basis with all the things that can potentially go wrong or just not happen the way you expected them to happen. So you're coming from the dry goods side, right? The ambient side. So tell us a little bit about kind of maybe some of the differences there that you're seeing now being on the cold side as well. And kind of the temperature regulated side. I mean, what are some of the differences between those two things?
Yeah. The big thing, and it's everyone's favorite topic, is cost. I don't mean that in the sense that, one thing's more expensive than the other. But as you know, if you were, operating and fulfilling and shipping non-perishable goods, the name of the game is always cutting costs. And if you can find a new vendor that's going to save you even a few percent and not make you worse at your job or be a lesser service than what you have today, you're likely going to go with that vendor or software or service of some kind. That's not the case with perishable. The best example is when it comes to shipping, because everyone's using hopefully a combination of last mile carriers. But even if they're just using one, the name of the game is shipping as few orders in the air as you can, because that's obviously a lot more expensive. And even those like 2-day, second day service levels, they're not guaranteed most of the time. So when I talk about the cost adversity, if you're talking about non-perishable, it's like, okay, if my maximum transit is X, right? Whatever I'm telling my customers I'm going to ship their products to in that speed, I'm going to go around constantly, or have someone on my team whose job it is to constantly talk to carriers, see what their pricing is, see what they can offer, and get the lowest price. You're not going to necessarily go about it in the same way when you're shipping perishable. And in fact, as many people in the perishable space know, sometimes it makes sense to like hold orders. You know, the weather is a huge thing. And that's something that our system tracks and then allows you to prescribe rules based on weather and temperature. So, you know, if there's extreme weather in a region of the world, there's a hurricane in Florida. If it's supposed to land tomorrow and you have 100 orders that should go out today and your transit time is 1 or 2 days there, you shouldn't ship those because it's almost definitely going to be delayed. So that's the kind of insight you need. And I'm not necessarily saying that you wouldn't hold those orders on the non-perishable side. Yeah. But if something gets held at a sorting center and delayed a day or two, yes, you're going to have, you know, potentially some angry customers. But in the non-perishable space, the order still gets there. It's not ruined. Right. And, you know, you give them I don't own a brand. So I don't know, a 10% off coupon or something for their next order, or some free swag in their next order to make them happy again. On the perishable side, if it gets delayed a day and temperature inside the box goes above a certain degree and spoils, you're then refunding the entire order. You're losing whatever that cost of goods are. And that can be in the hundreds of dollars sometimes. So it just becomes very, very important. Another great example too is like, let's say you are just shipping with FedEx or UPS, and that's your only carrier. If they have 100 clients that they're picking up for, and they're going to the same route, right? So it's something going from Chicago to New York City. We have the ability to potentially limit that exposure to a delay just based on volume, right? Is that if they're forecasting to deliver 1,000 orders on time and they have 1,500 that they have to get delivered, some of those are going to be late. So what we can do is help move orders away from there with, you know, another one of our carriers and make sure that we're protecting, you know, 99 of those 100 clients and get it there on time.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think certainly there's a lot of kind of complexities around that and challenges too, to kind of navigate. And like you said, you know, understand, you know, should I actually ship this order, where, you know, I think there's been so much like push and things are in that nature around, you know, getting the order out the door as soon as possible. Where here, like, it's more about getting the order out the door at the right time to make sure that, you know, order is going to be actually like viable and usable by the time it's delivered. And, you know, certainly can be a lot of potential cost involved in if there's a delayed shipment or something like that. Not only is the customer upset, but they're probably extra upset because they can't even use the product or whatever it is they ordered or consume it and when it gets to them, right? And now they got to wait for it again. And do they even want to wait for it again? You know, maybe it was something for a special occasion or something like that. But, you know, I think it's very interesting to have that visibility that you guys are providing, like you said, you know, especially with the weather situations and things like that, to know, okay, I should hold this order, or it's okay to let this order go, or even from a capacity and volume perspective, you know, or, you know, part of these orders just going to get delivered late because it's going to be above the capacity that the carrier can handle or something like that. I think that's really smart to be able to have that level of visibility and know those things ahead of time and be proactive, because you're going to just lose money either way if that's delayed. So when you look at kind of the cold chain perspective, and, you know, there's, I feel like I'm seeing, you know, more brands that are coming out with things that are perishable and things like that from an e-commerce perspective. I think because the consumer is more adopted to ordering things online, right? So now like ordering things that maybe they wouldn't ever consider ordering before or traditionally would pick up from the store because it is perishable. Like they're more kind of geared towards that. So, as these companies are coming out and brands are, coming up with new things that are perishable, how do you advise or like what should companies take into account when they're looking for these partners to help them on the cold chain side of things?
Yeah. You actually answered your question. It's all about visibility and tracking, right? So if you can find someone that's going to give you more visibility, more customization, more flexibility, right? The big thing I always bring up is in the non-perishable world, if you and I go start a facility, just the two of us, and we bring on 10 different clients, right? And we get our daily orders, we're going to try to ship those orders out the exact same way as often as we can, right? Because that's traditionally, if you're an operator, that's kind of the most efficient way to do things. If you do that in perishable, you're going to expose yourself to all kinds of risks, right? And I think even without the technology that's been lacking in the perishable space, people have already kind of manually adapted to like seasonal packouts where, you're going to pack your order, the same exact order. If it happens on a monthly basis, let's call it a subscription, you're going to pack that order several different ways depending on the time of year because of the weather. You're going to have to use a lot more coolant in the summer. And if we think about like Arizona in the summer, it defies all perishable fulfillment logic, right? You're going to want to put 15, maybe 20 pounds of coolant in that package if it's going there. And if you're not in a location super close to areas like that. I also wanted to go back to the point from earlier, just about, costs and a little bit less risk adverse on costs for perishable. When I was giving that example, right, of going from Chicago to New York, and the example had one carrier in play. Let's just pretend that they do have multiple carriers in play, but that carrier was chosen because it's the cheapest in the amount of time we have to get it there. To my point, if that carrier is the cheapest, but we know that their on-time delivery, another thing that our system tracks for you, is 85%, but carrier number 2 has a 90% or 95% accuracy rating, you're going to, even if that carrier is more expensive by $1 or $2, you're going to pay that extra dollar every time, because paying $1 or $2 more on shipping, which, in the non-perishable world, people go nuts about. But in the perishable world, you're going to pay that $1 or $2 more to have a higher chance of on-time delivery 9 times out of 10. The problem is that people haven't had visibility into that. And so, kind of the industry standard is like, if you want to talk about like shrink rate, you're basically accounting for 15% of your orders to have to be reshipped, just depending on where carriers are tracking on the on-time delivery side.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think that's, such a big number too. I mean, just to factor in and just say like, oh yeah, well, 15% of my orders I'm going to have to redo, basically. I mean, is a huge cost, and something that, if you can get a hold of that, like it can be a big win, I think, for your brand or your company to be able to reduce that number. And certainly the visibility on that is such a huge thing, because I think there's so many points too at which, the temperature could fluctuate or adjust. And, there's so many more points where something could potentially go wrong with that product in transit or in handling, wherever the case may be. So tell us a little bit about, I guess, from that perspective, like the Coldcart solution, is this something where if I'm a brand, do I plug into the Coldcart solution, or is this something that I'm looking for like a fulfillment provider to have as a tool? Which side of the table do I want to be on from a Coldcart perspective?
We'll be back after a quick break.
I hope you're enjoying this episode. Do you want more warehouse content delivered to your inbox? Sign up for our new email series called Warehouse Wisdom Wednesday to get an educational series of emails on warehouse basics delivered directly to you every Wednesday morning. Find the sign up link in the show notes.
Well, to give you a little inside baseball, it's honestly both. It started as a brand focused software, but I came in and called it out right away. And it wasn't like I was the catalyst in this. I think almost everyone internally saw it, but I was like, we could turn this into maybe a light WMS, because when you think about the process and the automation, the transfer of documentation, I think the argument can be made that we're doing just as much for the folks doing fulfillment, and in a lot of cases, third party, as we are for the brands, right? The brands love the visibility and the ability to prescribe and change rules based on all types of metrics. But when it comes to the flow on the floor, we take a bunch of really complex logic and boil it down into basically 3 labels, right? There's a wave summary that shows what needs to be picked at this location to pick and pack this brand's orders. And then there's subjective pick tickets and shipping labels associated with every order. So the wave summary, obviously, like I said, tells you everything that you need to get today to fulfill. But the pick tickets and shipping labels have taken into account any of these processing and packaging rules you've put in place. So if we go back to that like weather-based rule, you can have something, and this is, in my opinion, better than like a seasonal pack out solution, because if you have a weather-based rule, and let's just say if it's 80 degrees or higher at the destination, ship something this way. Generally, that's like add 5 more pounds of dry ice or something like that. That's going to be in play all year. So it doesn't matter if it's 80 degrees in New Jersey in the summer or 80 degrees in Florida in the winter, right? Because if it's 80 degrees in Florida in the winter and you have your winter standard pack out and you're not aware of that weather and no one's tracking it, even that box is going to be extra risk to potentially thaw.
Interesting. Yeah. And I love that it's taking that into account in real time, because I think there's so much fluctuation there and challenges to, be able to just put in kind of like a broad, like you're saying, kind of seasonal pack out rule. There's so much variation there in what's going on. Like, because even now, I mean, we see too, like, just random crazy spikes in temperature in places and times of the year where you would be expecting it to be cold, but it's actually like not that cold anymore. And, I think seeing that and understanding what's going on, and, obviously I think like an individual could not be able to, do that in a very efficient way. So having the system do that for you, I think is really a great thing. So, I mean, are you seeing where third-party providers are kind of bringing in Coldcart to almost be like a value add to their clients or potential clients?
Yeah, that's what we're working on, or what I'm working on, right? Is having those conversations with some of our partners and saying, hey, here's what we have today. Where does this need to be for you to not necessarily run your entire facility? Because for example, our system's not going to say, use this pick journey and go to this location to pick these. It's just going to give you what you need. And believe it or not, like sometimes that's all you need. Mostly talking about folks doing 1P fulfillment. But, even on the 3PL side, that level of automation and stuff, basically we're just now gathering a lot of feedback on, where we're at today and where we need to be to make that something that they can confidently invest and commit in. And then just like you called out, right? If the site's using Coldcart, it just makes it that much more advantageous for all the clients in that facility that are perishable to also be using Coldcart, and it's all connected.
Interesting. Yeah. And I love that you're getting the feedback too from them to see like, what else do we need to add, or where do we need to be, and how do we continue to evolve this so it's meeting all those needs there. And I'm curious too, I mean, as you're, exploring this space and talking to people and what they're looking for, both on the brand side and also the provider side, there's certainly been a lot of talk over the last couple of years about challenges with cold storage and, limited availability and things like that. And, there's only, a handful of big time providers, and they're not always the best, right? So I'm curious, like, what are you seeing out there in the market in terms of people trying to address like this space and capacity issue on the cold side?
This is very much entrenched from my days at ShipBob, but I believe that there is more value in partnering with brands early on and growing alongside them than, the game that these big nationwide cold chain fulfillment centers are playing. They're going around and trying to steal all the biggest volume shippers and, cut costs by, like I said earlier, 2-3%, whatever it is. That's a really tough game to play. And that's, from the sales side, that's a really tough sale because you have to take that and use it as motivation to upend, a multi-million-dollar day-to-day operation, right? So, as much as I am talking to larger brands, I think that where the industry's at, it's kind of like when I worked at ShipBob, I would use the music analogy where it was like, I started at that company when it was a garage band and we were like headlining music festivals when I left. And that's what excites me about perishables, because it reminds me of where the non-perishable e-commerce industry was, 6, 7, 8 years ago. So because of that, there's going to be these brands that, they do, 100 orders a week, but getting there, if anyone's ever gone out and started a brand, getting to 100 orders a week isn't easy.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's a lot of value in partnering with brands early on and allowing them to grow. Some of the biggest brands that I've ever worked with sometimes started as a pre-launch. So there's definitely something to be said for that. And I think that the more, if you own a cold chain facility, I think the more you can adopt to that, as long as you're protecting your costs and making sure you're not bringing in 100 clients that just collect dust.
Yeah.
I think adopting to that mindset a little bit more and being a little more eager to allow brands to grow with you is a lot easier to get them in the door, rather than wait till they're at 10,000 shipments a month and more or less happy with what they're doing and try to, squeeze pennies out of it and undercut something and get them to go from 5 locations into 5 of your locations in different parts of the country. It's a very big move.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's like really good advice there too. I mean, to, kind of grow with them, because I think it is, a lot, and I agree with you too, that, in the e-commerce space, I feel like the perishable is still kind of just being penetrated in a sense and being grown a little more. And I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier about the kind of the consumer mindset is more attuned now to ordering things that maybe they were kind of on the fence about, a couple of years ago. And now like it's just becoming more, second nature to just, get almost everything online. Right. And so I think it's interesting to see that grow. And I think that there is like opportunity there. And I'm curious your thoughts on this too, because there's a lot of talk about, just from like an e-commerce fulfillment provider or 3PL perspective that, there may be some consolidation, or maybe like it's slowing down in growth because there just, was like kind of a spike in providers around like the e-commerce boom and all these things. But I mean, how do you think that opportunity, or is there more opportunity maybe on the cold side of things than there is on the ambient side of things for 3PL providers out there? I mean, what do you think the balance is there?
That's a really good question. So, that's definitely a big reason why I chose to jump into perishable.
Yeah.
Obviously, from just a very selfish perspective, it's just a great way for me to diversify and learn something new without, necessarily jumping into just a completely brand new industry. So it's definitely a way for me to like level up on my operations sided mind and learn about the differences and stuff. But like I said, I think that this if this industry is truly 10 years behind where non-perishable is, and there's that opportunity to, just like when, folks go from one company to another, you take all the stuff that's good and you adopt that and apply it. And then the stuff that went bad, you give insight to the people at your new organization and say, we tried that and it didn't work. And here's why. So we can get to something that works, but we should do it this way rather than the way we did it last time. So that's the other thing too. This goes back to my last point, which is like, there's going to be a lot more of these smaller brands that need partners to grow alongside because they're running something very complex with a lot of customization that needs a lot of flexibility. And you come to find that they're running their entire operation with like ShipStation, which I love ShipStation. No shade at ShipStation, but when you need weather-based rules and all this kinds of stuff and inventory tracking and stuff like that, it just doesn't come with that. So, that's kind of where we're positioning ourselves. Is it's a great way to level up transparency, automation, and basically once you go through onboarding with Coldcart, aside from the physical stuff like sending inventory and buttoning up your supply chain, from a user perspective on the software side, you're basically in like data monitoring mode. You're making sure that we're sending all your batches to the site or sites that you're shipping out of. You're making sure all the costs are in line. We can track all your costs. So we can track, last mile packaging, pick and pack costs. Everything is very transparently in the dashboard, both at a high level. So you can look at like, what your costs were for 6 months on this specific cost. You can also get a list of your costs in each order. So that's what's most important, because when you think about the value, right, you can show all the bells and whistles on a piece of software, but what does it actually calculate to in savings? And that's where it's like having a rule-based logic on weather versus having a seasonal pack out means that there's going to be 100 orders over the winter where it's still going somewhere very warm because it's just a, not normally warm year in Arizona or Florida or both. And you get exposed to that kind of stuff. So that's where the fine tuning really ends up adding up on your savings and cost.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, great that you brought that up and, all the way to that breakdown on the cost side, because at the end of the day, that's really kind of what matters and what's going to, help you understand like where your business is at and how you can improve on some things and really have that overall visibility that you guys are providing with the Coldcart solution. So I think it's really great to talk to you, and it's been super insightful on the cold chain perspective and what you guys are trying to do at Coldcart and how you're addressing some of these problems and creating better visibility into some of these things. Like I love the weather tracking and, notifications and things like that. So super interesting talking to you here, Bob, and really appreciate you coming on the show. If people are
likewise, sir,
interested in learning more about Coldcart, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can go to coldcart.co. That's our website. If you fill out a form, we will get back to you ASAP. And even if you're not looking for perishable fulfillment or software or anything that Coldcart's doing, I have my own website, egrowthadvisors.com. And I, along with one of my old colleagues, consult on, 3PLs, particularly how do you level up your sales on the 3PL side? Because a lot of 3PLs are just like, paying for clicks and stuff like that. So we consult on that kind of stuff. And then obviously, how do brands diversify on the carrier side, on the 3PL side, and ultimately just, different ways to grow and scale their businesses.
All right, great. And great to get that information. And we'll definitely put all those links so people can easily find them at thenewwarehouse.com as well. So, Bob, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.